It looks like Kentucky football is probably going to fire Mark Stoops at some point, but with the way that the coaching carousel is starting to unfold, it's going to be virtually impossible to find somebody that fits this job.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we're going to be talking about the coaching carousel at large and kind of what exactly Kentucky's plan is here, because to be honest with you, hiring somebody right now might be virtually impossible for the Wildcats, and it looks like they're going to let go of Mark Stoops either very, very soon or at the end of the season. We'll talk about all of that, as well as maybe some candidates that Kentucky can try and go after if they are still on the board when all is said and done. And then to wrap up the show, there is one statistic that if Kentucky improves in offensively for basketball, they will have one of, if not the best offenses in the country. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. So, Kentucky is going to probably fire Mark Stoops at some point. Now, there are conflicting reports out there as to whether or not Kentucky is going to do that as early as this weekend, or if they're going to do it at the end of the season. But there seems to be a consensus that Kentucky is going to move on from Mark Stoops by the end of the year. If that ends up not happening, cool, whatever. Let's march into 2026 with Cutter Boley and pray something different happens for Kentucky offensively and they're able to kind of rebound here with arguably the best coach in their school's history. But if they don't do that and they end up firing Stoops, again, as early as this weekend after the Auburn game or at the end of the season, the Wildcats are kind of screwed. And it's not necessarily anything that they've done wrong per se. It's just the reality of what college football is right now in terms of the jobs around them that are starting to open up. Here's a list of every single open Power 5 job right now. Florida, LSU, Arkansas, so there's 3 already in your own conference. Penn State, for now, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, Stanford, UCLA, and Oregon State. Those are the open Power 5 jobs currently. Florida, LSU, Penn State already makes this an insane cycle, with Brian Kelly getting fired literally last night, and here we are now with LSU to go along with Florida and Penn State. It's just insane. Also, Arkansas, I think, can be a respectable job. Stanford has been very good in the past. Virginia Tech, obviously, with the history there. Oklahoma State has been really good in the Big 12 in the past. Very consistent program under Mike Gundy, who has now been let go. A lot of really good programs that are miles ahead of where Kentucky football is at the moment. And then on top of that, a lot of programs that are either currently on their level or are capable of hiring somebody away from a program like Kentucky. So those are the jobs that are open currently. Here's the list of jobs that could come open. And I say could come open. Some of these jobs are almost definitely going to come open. It's just a matter of time. Obviously, Kentucky is at the top of this list. Auburn, North Carolina, Nebraska, Florida State, Wisconsin, Baylor, Colorado, NC State, Kansas, Michigan State. Those are the list of jobs that I think are almost definitely going to come open. And then also I threw some in there as well that I think there's a chance they could come open. Like, for instance, Colorado. I'm not quite sure what Deion's plan is considering his health issues. I think this could be something where he just retires and calls it quits. Baylor could move on from Dave Aranda after a pretty bad start and their frustrations with the performance over the last couple of years. Kansas could move on from Lance Leipold, or Leipold could get a job at one of these already open Power 4 schools. Michigan State could move on from their current head coach. We don't know. Wisconsin, the fact that they have not fired Fickell already is shocking to me. Florida State is going to probably fire Mike Norvell by the end of the year. Nebraska is probably going to lose Rule in all of this coaching madness. Auburn is definitely going to fire Hugh Freeze before the end of the season, barring a miracle end of the year, which is probably not going to happen, to be honest with you. If I had to guess right now, I would say Kentucky beats them in Jordan-Hare this Saturday. But North Carolina is probably going to come open because there's no way they're just going to ride this into another year with Bill Belichick. There's a lot of different jobs, good quality jobs. Florida State, Auburn, Wisconsin, Baylor, I think, is a good job. Nebraska, obviously, is a really good job that could come open to go along with, again, the Floridas, the LSUs, the Arkansas, the Penn States, the Stanfords, the UCLAs, which I guess you could look at that as potentially a good job. I don't necessarily know if it is, but anyway, my point being here, Kentucky might be screwed. Kentucky might be screwed here because there are so many other big-time jobs that are going to come open that Kentucky's top candidate, which we will get to here in a moment, might be lured away to another place because of the money and the resources and the investment that they have. Not to say Kentucky can't invest in their current football program. They're obviously paying their current head coach $9 million a year to be mid. But as it stands, if you don't get this one guy, who else are you going to go get that actually moves the needle for your program? Again, you might be throwing some names out there right now if you're listening to this and you strongly disagree, or maybe if you do agree, it doesn't matter. You may be listing some names. Those could very well be going to a place like Virginia Tech. They could be going to a place like Wisconsin. They could be going to a place like NC State if Doran decides to hang it up. We don't know. This is going to be very difficult for Kentucky to get the guy that they want and to be able to, and if they don't get him, go get somebody else that is as good of a hire as he would potentially be. We'll get to that candidate, obviously, here, as well as a number of other guys that I would call. And I'm just going to let you know, if it is not one specific guy that Kentucky gets, then there is only one phone call that I am immediately making after missing, if it does happen. And I'll tell you who those two guys are, as well as a number of others here in just a moment. Before we do it, though, tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. College football is here. Obviously, I'm very excited, actually, for this weekend between Auburn and Kentucky. Should be a very, very interesting game with a lot of weird storylines, the tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually, getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. It's endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time in just a couple of taps. I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. The app makes it super simple. I could even see my exact view from my seat before buying. It's actually even better in person. Guarantee it. Every time I've used Game Time, that has 1,000% been the case. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I have ever bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying your college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege at $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, continuing along here on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Talking about how Kentucky might have a serious problem on their hands when it comes to finding a new head coach if they choose to fire Mark Stoops, which it's now looking like more and more of a possibility every single day. Let's talk about potential candidates for the Kentucky Wildcats. And this is not anything crazy. This is not a blistering hot take. Kentucky's number one option, the top guy that they will be going after, is Tulane head coach Jon Sumrall. Obviously, because of his connection, formerly coaching here, this is the man that you want for the job. And frankly, it sounds like Sumrall is interested, but at the same time, he's also interested in a handful of other jobs. I think that you are looking, again, I said this about a week or so ago, I'll reiterate it here. You are looking at a number of jobs within your own conference that Jon Sumrall could go to. And now that the LSU job is open, there's going to be a fight for Jon Sumrall. There's going to be a fight for some of the top tier coaches in this sport to go fill maybe a place like an LSU or a Florida or an Auburn or what have you. And if those schools don't get their top guy, their second option is Jon Sumrall. This is going to be very difficult, I think, for Kentucky to hold on here. And if they do, if they fire Stoops and they get Sumrall, awesome, because you have just stolen a coach from the likes of Florida, LSU, Auburn, the three of the better programs in this league. And he's coming here because he wants to. And frankly, I think Kentucky has the money to pay him as well. But if you don't get Jon Sumrall, who I think is the clear top option here and would be excellent, I think, at Kentucky, there is one phone call that I am immediately making after if Jon Sumrall says no and he takes the Florida or the LSU job. By the way, real quick, just want to throw this out there. Do you know how funny it's going to be if Lane Kiffin... Well, this is not going to be funny for Kentucky. Do you realize how funny it's going to be if Lane Kiffin just decides, you know what, I'm just going to stay in Oxford. I'm just going to stay at Ole Miss. I'm just going to rock it out here in Mississippi. LSU and Florida, and likely Auburn as well, they're probably going to crap a brick. And then one of them is going to go get Jon Sumrall, and then the other two are going to be, I kind of panicking a little bit, I would assume. The only other guy that I'm immediately making a phone call to before I evaluate all my options is Brent Key at Georgia Tech. He is the guy that I'm going to and saying, look, you make $4.5 million right now. You have built this program into something special. We will pay you $7 million, $6.5, $7 million to come build this program back to where it was. Reestablish what Kentucky was on the offensive line. Reestablish an identity within this program. The physical, hard-nosed brand of football that Kentucky wants to play. Reestablish that. We will give you the money to go and recruit the style of player that you need to fit this program. I think that Key would be awesome here if Kentucky was somehow able to pull him away from Georgia Tech and they missed on Jon Sumrall. Those are my top two guys. Sumrall, Key. My third option would be Will Stein, the Oregon OC. Obviously, Louisville connections, grew up in Kentucky, former UTSA offensive coordinator as well. Not as fired up about the concept of Stein compared to somebody like Key or Sumrall, but again, kind of take what you can get. And at this point, after Stein, here are the list of names that I have that I am literally just firing from the hip as far as guys Kentucky could contact that I would be interested in hearing how they could fit into this job. And I want to reiterate something here. I'm not an insider. I can tell you a little bit about what's going on with Sumrall, as can a lot of people, but I'm not an insider. So any name that I mention here, don't take this and go somewhere and say, well, Lance Dawe of Locked On Kentucky is reporting anything. These are just names that I find interesting, just to make that clear. James Franklin, excuse me, I couldn't even do it without laughing. James Franklin, former head coach of Penn State, I think would be a very interesting conversation here. There has been with the few Kentucky fans that I've talked to about Franklin, there's been an interesting divide between I would love to have James Franklin and absolutely not. Why would we ever hire James Franklin? He can't win the big game. And I was on Round of Shots actually last night, and the question was asked, when is the last time Kentucky has put themselves in a position to even be competitive in the big game? It's been a couple of years at the very least, and Stoops has had some pretty talented players come through this program, specifically at skill positions that I don't think we've utilized to their fullest extent, and they've failed. Even in those big games, Stoops has failed. Franklin could very easily, with the right resources, build this program past where it currently is. I think that we're talking about, I'm more interested in raising the floor here than getting somebody that is more volatile, I guess is what I should say. Which, again, I think Sumrall would do that. I think Key would do that. I think Franklin would absolutely do that as well. Franklin would be a name that I'd be interested in. But with the jobs that are coming open, man, somebody is bound to hire him before Kentucky gives him a call. So that would be a name. G.J. Kinney at Texas State, the head coach there. I think he would be interesting just because of what he brings to the table offensively. Don't necessarily know if that would be the best option for Kentucky. Frankly, I don't know if he'd be the best option at a number of Power 4 schools. But Kenny would be an interesting conversation at the very least. I think that Jeff Traylor, who was like 58, I think that he would also be another interesting conversation here. Somebody that Kentucky could pursue. Glenn Schumann, Georgia's defensive coordinator, I think is also another guy who is probably going to get a job somewhere at some point with the way that he's performing there in Athens. Brian Hartline is almost definitely going to get a head coaching job somewhere. He interviewed for the West Virginia job last year. Rich Rod got that. Hartline would be somebody interesting here. Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, with the way Vanderbilt's playing, I know a lot of you might not like to hear it, but Clark Lee would be better. I think right now. I think that he has a chance to elevate this program, as would his offensive coordinator Tim Beck. I think that he is probably going to get some shouts here. And then the last guy on my list, who I just find interesting, is UNLV head coach Dan Mullen, former Florida and Mississippi State head coach as well, obviously. Now, Mullen has said a number of times this offseason and during the season over and over and over again, like he's like, I don't know how much more clear I can make it. I'm going to be here at UNLV next year. I like Vegas. This is where I want to be, and I'm content. Far too often have we seen head coaches say, no, I'm going to be here next year. I like it here. I want to be here. I want to continue to coach here. And then days later, they're on a bus to next biggest stop, right? Mullen, I believe him that he likes Vegas. I believe him that he wants to be there. The right amount of money comes calling. I think it's hard to say no. So we'll see. We will see. I just throw out that name because I think at the very end of the day, I mean, with all these jobs coming open, I mean, Mullen's going to get a call. He's going to get a lot, actually. So again, Jon Sumrall, Brent Key, Will Stein, James Franklin, G.J. Kinney, Jeff Traylor, Glenn Schumann, Brian Hartline, Clark Lee, Tim Beck, Dan Mullen. Those are some of the names that I'm just firing from the hip right now, and then some that I would be very interested in, and specifically Sumrall and Key. Okay, let's wrap up the show by taking a look at one statistic, one stat that if Kentucky improves in, which I expect them to, they might have the best offense in the country. We'll break that down here in just a moment. Before we do it, though, tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You could place this down on NBA. You could place this down on college football, maybe some college basketball, because that starts next week. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's wrap up the show here by taking a look at one statistic that if Kentucky basketball improves in, I think they might have the best offense in the country. Now, obviously, I think this team is probably going to be better at a lot of different things this year. Athleticism, speed, just defense as a whole, rim defense, creating turnovers, maximizing your possessions and that end of the floor. But that's kind of been the theme, right? This offseason is maximizing possessions for this team. And one of the biggest things we've talked about, and Pope has talked about, is second chance opportunities with the squad. Offensive rebounding, Last year, Kentucky had one of the worst offensive rebounding percentages in the SEC. 28.2%, which was 229th nationally. Pretty bad. They were not, if they had found a way to maximize their offense and get a bunch of different second chance opportunities, they might have had the best offense in the nation. But it was 28.2% and then 27.6% in conference play, which was 12th in the league. Not good. You have to find a way to grab more O boards this year and create more opportunities for your offense. This is not as good of a shooting team as it was a season ago, but it's a much more athletic team, and it's a freaking huge team as well. Getting those second chance opportunities, I think, will greatly help Kentucky out, because the more opportunities you give yourself to score, at the very least, it's taking time away from your opponent. At best, you're getting second chance points. And against Purdue, I think we saw some potential here. This is a huge Purdue team down in the front court. TKR, Oscar Clough, Jacobson, the 7'4" guy for them. Kentucky grabbed 10 offensive rebounds. They had 14 second chance points in that game. A 78-65 final score, I believe. 13-point win. You had 13-point win, 14 second chance points. Pretty significant. But their offensive rebound percentage was 30.3%, which would have been 168th last year. For context, 182nd or higher in the nation is above average. So they would have had a slightly above average OREB percentage if they continued to do this, that to have that sort of number. But to be honest with you, with how big Purdue is, I think that number could be a lot bigger for Kentucky, could be a lot higher in a lot of contests this year, I think, because of how big Kentucky is, because of how physical they can be with guys like Diabate, guys like Marino, guys like Garrison. Kentucky's going to have a chance to put a lot of offensive rebounds up. And man, if you're able to do that, you start to put opponents in a really tough spot, because if you start scoring off of those opportunities, it really stresses them out and forces them to maybe be more aggressive offensively. Shots don't go down. Kentucky runs in transition. Kind of starts to snowball on itself, right? Florida last year shot 35.6% from three, which was 82nd nationally. Not an insane number, but a good one. 35.8% from in SEC play, which was 6th. So it's a good number there. They were good at the rim. They were good at not turning the ball over. They were decent at getting to the foul line. But the best thing that they did on offense was grab offensive rebounds. They were 5th nationally at 38.5%. If Kentucky is sitting at 33% or higher, I think, 33% or higher, which would be good for, trying to find this here, 83rd nationally or higher. If they can do that, if they can get a third of their boards, right? Or if they can get a third of their misses, I guess I should say. And they can capitalize on half of that or more in terms of second chance points, Kentucky's going to be arguably the best offense in the nation because of what they're already going to do with their first opportunity to score. Because of how efficient they are, they're probably going to put the ball in the basket. But if they miss and they're able to get a third of those, it's going to make it really difficult for opponents to keep up night in and night out, even if the three ball isn't going down at a high percentage. And that was kind of the thing, right? We talked about this a lot, actually, last year when it came to that Florida matchup. And we were just talking about the Gators quite a bit last year as they continued their dominance through the SEC a season ago, is that's kind of what their bread and butter was. There was a lot of games where they didn't shoot that well, but it was volume that kind of got them there at the end of the day. Kentucky, 29 threes were put up against Purdue. They made 9 of them. You get that kind of production, and you only shot 33-ish% from three, I think. You get that kind of production night in and night out. Kentucky calmly scored 78. They didn't have a great shooting night. It's because they grabbed offensive rebounds, second chance opportunities. They turned Purdue over a little bit. If you're able to just get any sort of opportunity to possess the ball and just keep away, basically, while being really efficient, you're going to be a dominant squad. Very dominant squad. Okay, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_ and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.